All right, everybody, let's get started. Thanks for jumping on the call today. We're excited you're here. My name's McKay Allen. I'm on the marketing team at Kenect. We're also really excited to have Maddy Martin from Smithai on the call as well. We'll introduce ourselves more fully in a moment. But the title of today's presentation is The Biggest Lead Response Mistakes and Simple Fixes to Make Now. We're taking from a fairly significant research study we conducted at Kenect with both law firms, but also other types of businesses to dig into lead response, how quickly people are responding to leads, and what that means for their business. And then Maddy has some great tips to help improve that as well. So we'll dive into that and let's get started. So first of all, as I said, I'm on the marketing team here at Kenect. Maddy, thanks for jumping on today. We've done a couple webinars together, but it's been a while. So why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and talk a little bit about Smith.ai.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, McKay. It's great to be here again with you. I always love working with you. So I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing at Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist and web chat service for small businesses, including law firms, financial advisors, home professionals, you name it. We operate 24/7 and do a lot more than answering. We also complete appointment bookings, lead intake forms, outbound calls to people who fill out your web forms, collect payments and things like that. So we are very well integrated into the business software that you use, and just like McKay, really value the speed and content of a great response to leads and clients who are contacting you.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys are fantastic at what you do. It allows businesses to really respond to leads rapidly and not have to overstaff to do that or work outside of their normal business processes. So that's great. A little bit about Kenect. We are a text messaging platform built for law firms. We have a lot of other clients, but really built initially for law firms. We essentially allow you to keep your main law firm phone number to your main business number. And then with that number, you're able to log into Kenect and text people. So this allows you to communicate really efficiently, to generate new leads, to conduct video consultations with text, and to drive online reviews. Text messaging, I mean, you can read these slides or these statistics just like I can. But bottom line is texting is just the way people prefer to communicate today. It is the most significant change in communication since the invention of the telephone. And you're seeing businesses start to realize this and really be able to leverage this communication method. So imagine not having to play phone tag, never having to worry if somebody's in a meeting, but you just instantly send and receive text messages as well. You can see the ways that firms, but also other businesses use Kenect. Streamlining intake's big, sending case updates, collecting fees, video chatting. You can send photos, videos, PDFs, attachments with Kenect, and then generate online reviews as well. Okay, so what we've done here, the way we've broken this up, is we gathered some data around business response to inbound leads, specifically text messages. And you're going to see about 4 or 5 slides of that data. And Maddy and I will talk through those slides. And then Maddy's got some really great action items in terms of how you could potentially fix these things that we'll talk through as well. And then we want to take your questions. Now, before we start, we want to just make sure you know how to use the little question drop down. So if you go to GoToWebinar, see that little questions drop down, just click in there and click that questions area and just type in maybe city and state you're dialing in from today, just where you're dialing in from. That is going to help you get to know how to use the question area, and it's going to help us get to know who's on the call. So just go to the question area, type that information in. Again, that's how you'll ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll take them throughout the webinar and at the end as well. So just go to the question area and type that information in, and then ask us any questions as we go as well. Good, we've got a good crew on today. We've got about 55 folks. Sherry from Ohio, Katrina from Atlanta. We've got folks from Georgia, Salt Lake City, California, Florida, Texas. So it's a good group. So thanks for jumping on today, everybody. Okay. So to give you some background on this study, we analyzed 4,000 of our customers and looked at their inbound leads that they received via text messaging. And what we found was that the average business was receiving about 55 leads per month. 43% of those were after hours. And these are the texting leads, to be really clear. These are when somebody goes to a website and texts the main phone number or clicks on a little text us button that we provide. 43% of those leads were after hours. And then the response was really interesting. 16% of the leads during normal business hours were not responded to. 27% total were not responded to. That includes after hours. So, Maddy, any surprises just from this initial data dump here on the screen that you see, or just reaction to this data?
So what's actually really interesting to me is that the data in past years that I've seen showed about 25% after hours. So what's really interesting is that 43% here means that everything that we're seeing across the market, which is more social media engagement, more texting, more non-voice communications from leads, is showing up here in the data. So people are not only extending the hours that they reach out to businesses and more frequently reaching out after hours, but they're also using these channels that are non-verbal, non-voice to do that outreach, maybe because they think it's an appropriate mechanism to text instead of call later, or maybe they think it's less intrusive, but will still ensure the same quick response.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. And I should note about this data that the data that we gathered that will show you is specifically for law firms, but I will speak to what the data showed for non-law firms as well, because we got it from every vertical that we work with, every type of business. And so even though the slides will just show law firm data, I will speak to the others. So this was interesting. So the overall lead response rate is what you're seeing on the screen here. So essentially what this shows is the number of leads that are responded to, period, in the legal industry by quarter. So we started gathering this data in Q2 of 2020, which was a very weird quarter, as you recall. And we found that 53% of leads were responded to, 55 in Q3, 55 in Q4, and then went up to 58. We haven't gathered the Q2 data yet. We'll wait for a following quarter to complete, and then we'll gather that data. But the thing that I thought was interesting was the sub-industries. So you've really got a lot of different types of attorneys and law firms that are gathering really good, that are doing really well from a response rate standpoint, right? Employment, family law, but then you get down into personal injury, to real estate law, to estate planning, and then general legal, and it gets much, much lower. We thought this was a really interesting element of the data here, just to dive into exactly which subcategories in the legal industry are responding well and which aren't. The other one, and then I want to ask you to weigh in on this, Maddy, that I thought was interesting. These are the response times. So I want to highlight a couple things. On the previous slide, you see the number of leads that are being responded to, period. But then here you're seeing the amount of time it's taking people to respond to leads. So the first one is overall in legal, the average time it takes to respond to an inbound text message is 1.6 hours. So what is that, an hour and 40 minutes? If my decimals I learned in 8th grade are serving me well. And then after hours is 8.6 hours. So essentially what that means is if you message a law firm after 5 o'clock, you will not get a response till the next morning. And that's basically what that means. So during business hours, it's decent. It's like 45 minutes. But after business hours is really where the average goes up. So Maddy, any thoughts on this data? Does that surprise you to learn that after hours the response rate is that slow and that long?
Especially with law firms and other high referral, highly networked businesses, it's not surprising, but I think there's a huge opportunity here. The most sort of prevalent thing that's coming in my mind is, well, this is an opportunity to compete, because if this is what the majority of the market is doing, and we know that 2 out of 3 potential clients base their decision to hire a law firm specifically, and many other businesses, but specifically the Clio data showed for law firms, that 2 out of 3 potential clients base their decision to hire on the initial responsiveness of that law firm. So what that means is the majority of potential clients are not basing their decision on how well the conversation goes. It's, have they even had the chance to have a conversation? And we know that there are multiple referrals. A lot of people are using online search. They're not necessarily wedded to going with just the law firm that may have been recommended to them. It's the most responsive law firm that normally wins the business. So if you can cut this down, then you have a huge competitive advantage, frankly, at almost no additional cost to you, because the cost of not doing business is so much greater that there's really no net new cost here.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? You said something that I think I had assumed, but I don't know that I'd ever actually like seen data on, which is the stat you shared from Clio, which was most people choose a business initially based on the responsiveness, which is kind of startling because in professional services businesses like an accountancy or a wealth advisor or a law firm, like I think we normally think like, man, they're just going to choose the best, most educated, highest quality, most qualified professional. But in reality, it's just literally like, did they get back to me rapidly? That's like the decision factor for most
Yes.
white collar businesses. Am I wrong? Am I overstating that?
You're absolutely right. And I think there's a huge disappointment in realizing that all of the marketing and brand building and networking work that you've done is actually worth almost nothing if you don't respond 24/7 really rapidly. And there is a huge difference in responding after an hour versus after a minute. If someone has the opportunity to leave you a voicemail, they're already going to call the next business in line. And that might be the
Yep.
next business that shows on online search. It might be the next business that was showing in the posts that they made on Facebook and they got recommendations for, or the list that they have written down at their desk for like their friends' referrals to them. So people are expecting an instantaneous response, and they are most likely to go with that business that provides that to them. And the competitive advantage is for those who actually pick up, for those who respond to the text message, for those who have chat on their website, for those who have an active Facebook message account that actually can respond to the leads that are coming through their page. And you don't have hours. And an example I'll give of just the mindset here that you're competing with, and I think at a huge advantage if you take advantage of the responsiveness tools that are available to you, is one person at a conference I was at a couple years ago said, I use voicemail to actually screen people, and if they're not willing to wait for me for a couple days, then they're not the right fit for my clientele. Well, let us all be in that situation where we can have leads to burn and waste and don't have to worry about that risk. Most of us are not in that enviable situation where we have so much demand coming out of our ears that we can play those games. I would really recommend that you actually take the control with some of the techniques I'll talk about later, and make sure that you're screening leads really well up front, and then having meaningful conversations instead of making assumptions
Right.
about someone's tolerance to wait for you to get back to them and what that means about their viability as a lead.
That's a great point. And to compare this, just so everybody knows, to other industries. So I said I'd speak to this. So here's just a couple of tidbits. And I don't mean to pick on law firms, believe me. Law firms were the worst of any vertical that we measured in terms of response rate and response time. So for example, if you look at the same data on the right-hand side here for dealerships, so automotive as well as non-automotive dealerships, for example. During business hours, it was about 20 minutes, so 0.2 or 0.25 hours. And then after hours was a little over 3 hours. So if someone messages a dealership at 7 at night, someone is going to respond back that evening on average. At a law firm, it's the next morning. At other white collar type businesses, accountancies, wealth advisors, that kind of thing, you were looking at 5 to 6 hours after business hours and about a half hour during business hours. So legal was the outlier in terms of the length of response time, as well as the percentage that were responded to. So if I go back to this slide, you're seeing this number of responsiveness for law firms. Dealerships were up in the 70 to 80% range, and other white collar roles were between the two lines. So dealerships were the highest, law firms were the lowest, with other business types in the middle, if you look at the line. And then this I thought was really interesting in terms of slow response. So what this slide is showing is the number of leads that have a response that happens but is after 24 hours. So just to be, again, let me restate that. Hopefully I said it clearly. These are leads that are responded to, but they're not responded to for 24 hours or more, greater than 24 hours. And that is getting a little bit worse. So 19%, 19%, and then 23 and 22%. So what that means is 22% of legal leads have an over 24-hour response time, and the overall response rate, as we said before on that previous slide, was 58%. The thing that's kind of startling is if you add up the leads that are not responded to at all here, plus the leads that are responded to but are not responded to for 24 hours, that's like 60% of your leads that are either never responded to or not responded to for a full day, which I think was maybe the most startling bit of data we pulled from this study. And again, other industries were slightly better than legal. Other traditional like white collar industries were a little bit better than legal, but dealerships, home services did much better than accountants, wealth managers, law firms, etc. In these categories. So, Maddie, any thoughts on this before we jump into some of these solutions?
No, I mean, it absolutely tracks with the Clio data. I think that this study is just showing that what has been prevalent for the last few years continues to press us. And with COVID that we're facing, we're more limited in our time than ever. So if you are running a law firm, if you're operating or owning a law firm, any service-based business really, but specifically for law firms, is the most opportunity to gain while you also are thinking about, the allocation of your resources. It's not about spending more money on more advertising. It's about capitalizing on the leads that you have coming to the table right now. And then also the existing clients, and I'll get into this in a couple slides, who want to pay you more money because their experience is directly related to the responsiveness, and also that has bearing on your referrals, which obviously generates growth. So this is really just about the fact that across every part of the communication spectrum, from marketing to sales to support, whether it's leads or existing clients, they're expecting an instantaneous response, and they define that as something that's 10 minutes or less. Now, what's really interesting is that I saw a study recently that showed there's a 400 multiplier. So you're 400 times more likely to convert a client when you respond within the first minute of their call. So that's even factoring in a callback. And what that says to me is instantaneous is really the way to build your business. And if you don't have that baked in, then there is a major gap in the sort of operations of your firm.
That's really, I just think some of this data that's on the screen here is so interesting about just customers expect an immediate response. I think was probably exacerbated during COVID too, because we just demanded, like, I want food delivered to my house, and I want DoorDash to show up when I order. And you know what I mean? Like, we've now.
And my kids have been screaming all day that I'm their daycare and they're hungry again. And normally,
right.
I have time to focus, right? So like, that's a big part of it, is everyone is spread thin, not just those who are, delivering the services, but those who are requesting them. Those are your leads, right? So yeah, it's fascinating. And, so that first stat comes from that previous slide. And then, we see the amount of waste that's generated because leads are never contacted. So this data is very similar to what you showed. And that 79% never convert into sales. Well, a large contribution of that is because they're never contacted. Most of us are in businesses where there is some contact with a human involved. So if you go to the next slide, I think what's really interesting is that we have to factor in how much noise there is too. And if any of you are thinking like, well, I'm not answering my phone because 50% of the time it's spam calls or vendors or, Yelp trying to get me to spend more money. Well, you're not alone. Spam calls are totally on the rise. And I need to update that statistic from 2019, but it's even worse. And as a result, how do you have a good confidence level that when you answer that unknown call, that it's going to be a new lead, and that's why it's an unknown number and not spam or sales. And obviously receptionists are a solution for that. Obviously text messages are great for that because you immediately see who is contacting you and why in that message coming through. Now, 47% of incoming calls are answered. What does that mean? It means that when you try and make contact after a voicemail or a missed call is received, then you are struggling to get back in touch with that person who reached out to you, and you have very limited opportunity to actually make that connection. And then there you go, leaving a voicemail, and you play phone tag, and eventually someone gets tired and it stops and you don't convert that lead. So if you don't make a connection, again, through any of the channels, call, chat, text, whatever, then you are limiting your chances of actually having a conversation where that lead qualification and winning process happens. Now, lastly, we don't want to, have you spending all your time in these conversations that are going nowhere. So you have to really have proper vetting in place so that those conversations that happen early on are quick, they are controlled, the content is meaningful to that lead, and it is predictable every time. So you're not having a new lead conversation that's coming through and it's 5 minutes, and then the next one is 30 minutes because they just told you their life story. That's yet another reason why a lot of people are shying away from answering the phone. The answer is not to not answer the phone or to answer a text or to have those things actually coming through to you with priority, but the main objective is to make sure that you know the quality of those leads. So this is just an example of the funnel. And really what we're trying to control here is the very top of the funnel. Like, can we determine if they're qualified leads or not? You have to answer. Someone has to answer on your behalf at least, or have the technology to facilitate answering.
One thing that I'll add, Maddie, if that's okay, is I think sometimes traditionally we think about like, oh man, I gotta respond to them, I've got to answer a phone call, I've got to hear their life story, like you said, it's going to take 20 minutes. And if I happen to get a voicemail and go to call back, maybe they're in a meeting or they're at work. And that is what I kind of would underscore, like I said at the start, is that's the benefit of texting, is you don't have to take 20 minutes. You can take literally 20 seconds to respond to a text when you're at dinner, when you're at a soccer game, or have a company like Smithai respond to messages and things for you. The bottom line is like, there's much simpler ways than having to receive and to make phone calls all day, because I get how that can be. Like, there's nothing I hate worse than having to call a business. Like, I had to call Delta the other day to change a flight, and it was like a 3-hour experience that I will never get back, and I will likely think about on my deathbed as I wasted that time. But instead, it could have just been much easier if I had a way to message and stuff back and forth. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of this sounds overwhelming, but when you think about it in context of messaging as opposed to calls, it's really not.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's get into the recommendations, right? So the number one thing that I recommend is, and I often say phone systems, it includes text, like, are you receiving calls with delays or latency? Because that's extremely common, that someone will hear 10 rings, you hear one, you think, hey, I'm doing what Maddie and McKay said, I'm answering really quickly, and then it's dead on the line. So if you have latency, that might be blocking calls from coming through that are valuable. You also might not even know that text messages are coming through to your phone number, because some VoIPs do enable that, and you need to make sure that those messages are coming through. So if they can't come through, obviously you've got Kenect as your solution. And the main thing there is to know what world you're working with and then to improve from there. But if you're blind to it, there's no way to identify the lowest hanging fruit for improvement. Now, if we, think about how can we triage this across a team, if you have an in-house team, you might be able to, sort of round robin sequence them or send them a call blast, and whoever picks up first gets the call. You could have schedules where people are handling after hours, or you can work with a receptionist service like Smith.ai that can tackle that for you. Take the call, be your frontline sort of gatekeeper, and then pass it over as a transfer or as an appointment booked for anyone on your team. I would shy away from automated messages as much as possible. People don't necessarily feel like that's going to be a small business experience. They also don't necessarily know what type of caller they are. It's very hard to define that. And often that leads to a lack of responsiveness because there's a false sense of security that I've sort of got my phone system handled, when in fact it's that engagement early on, that conversation that happens, that's the most important thing. So the number of leads that are lost or voicemails that end up finding their way through your IVR, your phone system, is not necessarily worth all the fancy bells and whistles that you might have spent time setting up. All right, we can move on. And I think the next slide just talks about latency, which I mentioned. So call or have a friend call your business number, your main line, your direct line, whatever you've got plastered on your website, on your business cards, and then have them count how many rings it is till they hear your voice, and have you yourself count how many rings it is till you actually hear when you pick up. And if you pick up on the first ring and they said they heard 8, you've got a problem, and you need to email your phone system and your phone provider, and they can sometimes fix that for you. There's actually an email template in that blog post that I've linked to here, and we'll provide that deck as a follow-up to the session. So one of the other things that happens is that if you miss a call, because inevitably some calls will be missed, some texts might be missed, you send a message and then you don't get a reply because someone else had their screaming, crying kid who, needs to go out, or it's time for the play date, or whatever, people get distracted. It's not necessarily your fault. So even if you're doing your best work, if you do need to follow up, you need to send a reminder. We can see it's not always a straight path to winning the client. And if they don't immediately engage with you, and actually that diversion step on step 6 here might happen very early on, even before an appointment is booked, then you need to continue following up. And if you go to, I think, the next slide, we see that it actually takes a number of attempts before we have a confidence of over 90% that lead is going to or will ever convert. So the most important thing here is to keep following up and not to stop too soon. If you don't get in touch with them, or you were in touch and you need to get back in touch, you should really be trying 6 times, and that it might include phone calls, emails, texts, etc., to get back in touch. Typically, we recommend going with the channel where they initially reached out to you. So if you get a text message, send a text message back, send another text message back, and then a call. Email would probably be the least preferred way of getting in touch with that person who texted you, being as the least sort of tech enabled way to get in front of that lead.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So calendaring is really important here because it also facilitates not just the connection, but the next step. So if you are not already using a tool like WiseStamp, that puts a really beautiful email signature in for you, as we can see with Justy Nickel here, and your calendar link as well. Justy actually does a very good job of defining, when you click that link, what calendar types are for new leads, what calendar types are for existing clients, what you have to pay for and what you don't. I believe she uses Acuity. So there are a number of solutions here. Calendly has excellent integrations into Gmail and other tools to easily access your calendar link and put times directly in emails to facilitate sort of that speed to the real meat of the conversation. If you've got a business, maybe business law, where you need to bring multiple partners to a conversation, having something like Doodle where you can check multiple people's availability, that's very helpful as well to see, like, when are we going to be able to arrange the soonest time to meet. And all of these tools are either free or extremely affordable for a few bucks a month per user. So a couple things here, and you might be surprised to see an intake form. On this slide and also the next slide, there's a basic example of an intake form, and then also an example of, on the next slide, a sort of lead gen and engagement forms where you're giving something up front and you're giving something to respond to that's not what your competition is doing. So let's say that everyone has a contact form on their website, but you are working with landlords and they need to evict tenants. In this case, Tri-City Legal has actually created a digital version of the Chicagoland eviction notice, put it on their website. You're allowed to select the notice type 5-day or 21-day or whatever it is, put in the information. It's emailed to you, the lead, and then the law firm actually has all the information they need to follow up promptly with this landlord. The beautiful thing is that the time schedule is clear. It's a 5-day notice. You can follow up in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Did you handle that eviction? How is it going? Can we help you? And that's a way to have that immediate value add so that they are much more likely to pick up or to see your text message when it comes through and respond, because frankly, they owe you and they trust you because you've already helped them along in this process. So think about, like, what are the reasons for them to respond to you, because you need to cut through that noise of the day-to-day that we're all facing.
Yeah, that's the key, is cutting through that noise. So you mentioned the benefit, and you're going to hit it right here. So the benefit of that live interaction with somebody, whether it's a text or a message, this is really important, because I think, like you made the point of, this is just the most immediate way to communicate with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm. And think about how many times you've like chased and chased and chased this like potential lead. Maybe you've got CallRail set up or what converts, and you saw, wow, it was like a paid click, an organic click, whatever it was. It came through local search ads, and you think this is going to be the best lead. I've been chasing them for days, with phone calls back and forth, and I finally get in touch with them, and it turns out they actually didn't even reach out to you for the right practice area, and they're not a qualified lead. Maybe in a good case, you can refer them out to a firm you recommend, but that's the beautiful thing about chat and text and Facebook messages, any sort of non-voice communication, it being instant, it being readable. You can go back to it. You don't have to have voicemail transcribed or a conversation transcribed. You can get through a lot of these questions very quickly and efficiently to get to what is this conversation about. To get a text that says, I need help with, a child custody case. Well, you easily know that's what that conversation is going to be about. If you get a missed call and someone doesn't want to put that in a voicemail, then you're chasing someone who's not necessarily a good lead for your law firm, and that's wasted time. So these chats and texts and Facebook messages get to the heart of it instantly, and that allows you to then carry out the conversation, or allows a receptionist like Smithai to carry out that conversation. And we see that leads to a much higher conversion rate and a much better allocation of time. So, one of the last things that I'll mention is just like, how can you open up more time? Because one of the greatest things that can happen here is that you have more conversations with qualified leads, and that requires you to be available, and that calendar is open for booked appointments, for consultations, whether they're free or paid. So I always recommend tracking your time for a week and seeing, like, can I cut things out? I'm obviously going to endeavor to be as available as I can for the qualified lead conversations. If there's a receptionist who's trying to transfer a call to me, or I get a text message through and that person is ready to talk now, I do want to be available in the moment, or at least later that day. So can you build in buffer time or free time into your day where it doesn't already exist? I would highly encourage that you look at your calendar, figure out, can you, streamline it? Can you automate it? Can you outsource it? What is it that you're still holding on to that you could let go of, so that someone else can take care of it for you? And when that call comes through, you can make it rain. You can win that business, because that's something you're uniquely positioned to do. So by Smithai, really quickly, we are the most sophisticated receptionist service for two main reasons. One, we have the best live agents with significant experience in customer service and sales. We were backed by AI with our own proprietary technology, and that allows for things like real-time English-Spanish translation in our chats. It allows for robust CRM integrations with Zapier, so we can connect pretty much into any system that you have, notify you on Slack or Microsoft Teams if you have calls or chats that are coming through, and be able to follow complex processes like how to do intake for a family law client versus bankruptcy versus immigration, et cetera. So we offer, month-to-month plans starting at $210 a month, and across every channel we're operating. So a single partner in your service who is operating across all of these most important conversation methods. So if you skip ahead just to, give you a little bit of time, McKay, I'll summarize, and on that last slide, this is what I wanted to get to actually, just really briefly. 14% of existing clients, I've memorized it, it's okay, McKay, 14% more revenue from happy clients. And the most amazing thing there is, like, if you make people happy, not only do they refer clients, but they also will spend more with you. So getting set up is really easy. We work with every phone system, every website host. You will, share your instructions and guidelines with us. We'll build your account. We'll accept your calls, can forward them to us. And then you've got a risk-free 14-day money-back guarantee. So you have full confidence that you're working with the right service provider to support you.
Awesome. That's great. Sorry, I didn't know which slide you were referencing.
You're totally fine. And we do have an offer for everyone here. If you're not yet a client, the promo code is Kenect. And if you are an existing client, then we do have a few special offers on our website about live chat discounts, a la carte chat plans that are $0 a month pay per chat that we'd be happy to chat with you about.
Awesome. Very cool. And then on the Kenect side, you can text this or call us at this number. And we'll reach out directly. I think the thing I would stress just to conclude here is, look, the data is just the data. So we looked at it and we said, wow, that's insane that you have between not responding to leads at all and then waiting at least 24 hours. I mean, that's like 55 to 60% of the leads total are in one of those two categories, which is kind of startling. So I think the thing I would leave you with is figure out a way, whether it's with Smithai, whether it's an internal process, just figure some way out to respond more rapidly. It is incumbent that you do that, because like you said, Maddie, like, people are spending lots of money on their websites to get leads, on marketing, on paid ads, on social media campaigns, on billboards or direct mailers, whatever you're doing in your local market, you're spending money. And if you're not effectively capturing those leads in whatever way they're responding to you, you're just leaving money on the table. And so it's a big hurdle, I think, right now, where people, are communicating with businesses in so many different ways. To be able to respond to them in different ways is really important. So text us or call us if you want a demo of Kenect. We work with about 4,000 businesses, and we'd love to work with you as well. You can text us or call us at that number. We'll do a quick 30-minute demo with you, see if it's a fit for you and your business. If it is, great. If not, that's fine too. And then we can do an onboarding process that is literally just a training meeting with you and your team, and then 24/7 customer service after that. So if you're interested, let us know. Maddie, thanks. Any final thoughts before we conclude today?
No, just wanted to say thank you so much for having me, McKay. It was great to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. I really appreciate you jumping on, Maddie. And thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedule, everybody. Have a great Thursday and a great rest of the week.